Today we're going to go over the Adobe Lightroom Classic Workspace and tools. So if you want to open this with me, just go to the little magnifying glass at the top of your screen and you should be able to look up Lightroom Classic. It's an Adobe product. If you'd like to search it also in the Mosley Manager, if you do not have it on your computer, you can start the install on that. It's about 5 to 30 minutes, just depending. And you can also go to the tech office if it's giving you any problems. So I would highly encourage you to at least try this program while you still have it on your computers. And one nice thing about it is that there's a free app on your cell phone for Lightroom. So if you understand how these tools work, you're able to use them on into the future. So I have this photo shoot I did this week about film noir. So there's a lot of like fur coats and dark lighting and high ISOs that will look at how to adjust and make some changes in Lightroom. Okay, so first of all, what I really like about Lightroom is that you can see all of your pictures at once down here on this film strip at the bottom. So that allows you to very easily batch process or edit your photos together as opposed to opening one at a time in Photoshop. So you can really like flip between them very easily to see which ones you like. Like this one I can tell has her eyes closed, so I might prefer something more like this. So if you like a photograph, you can rate them. So if you press the 1 key, so right now it shows me which one I'm on up here. So if I press the number 1, it's going to set the rating to 1. So when I'm ready, after I've set enough to 1, say I'm like editing real quick and I need to be able to go back and see all the good ones, I can just go over here to where it says filters and turn the filters to rated. And now instead of seeing 300 pictures, right here it shows me I'm only seeing 71 of those 300. So I'm seeing the best of the best. So I'll keep it on that so that we can kind of speed up our workflow. So first of all, you're going to open your photographs, get them into Lightroom by going up to File, Import Photos and Videos, and then you can select them from wherever they are on your computer. I would recommend saving them to the disk first, saving them to the desktop, saving them somewhere on the computer, because if you upload photos directly from your SD card, those photos are not going to be linked anymore once you take the SD card out. So this program works in terms of, like, all of these are just previews of the file. This is not the actual file. It's not a real file until you export it at the end. So just be very careful that you're actually saving your photos first on the computer somewhere so that you can then export it later. Otherwise, you're going to take the SD card out, someone's going to delete the pictures, and then all you have is a really low resolution preview of that. So that's just a side note. You'll want to go to the Develop tab once you have your images open, and when you're under, sorry, there's like a menu in front of this, I can't see it. So when you're under the library view, you can see your images as a grid, so you can very quickly scroll through, or you can view them as just a single image. I like doing that so then I can make individual changes on that photograph. So this one I might see over here on the right. These are all my tools. This is why I like Lightroom, because it's simple. Everything is all in one place. You can really easily find what you need to. So when I edit a photo or a wedding, I would say 98% of the photographs I edit in Lightroom, and then only about 2% really need above and beyond stuff with Photoshop. Like if you're working with layers, Lightroom doesn't do layers. If you're working with blending modes or using selections and moving things around, Lightroom doesn't do that. Lightroom just does the basic changes. It's kind of like the camera raw filter that we looked at last time in Photoshop, where you can go to filter, camera raw, and you have all these different options like for highlights and shadows, but it's more robust than the camera raw, and it's less than Photoshop. So it's a nice in-between if you're just looking to do some basic edits. So for example, you can like change the temperature here, make it warmer, make it cooler. You can adjust the exposure, of course. So like you can see here, it brings out the sky, but she's really dark. So you might then go to like the shadows and bring up the shadow values. And then maybe once you like increase the exposure a little bit, she looks better, but maybe we want to lower the highlights. So you can really play and balance the values really easily in your photographs. That looks better already. And if you want to see the changes that you've made and how it compares to the original, you can press this little double Y down here and there. Very easily you can see before and after, so it helps you know if your edits are taking shape and looking good. This is, some people call it the S curve. The tone curve is kind of like the curves adjustment layer in Photoshop. So typically you want it to look like an S, meaning you bring the highlights up just a tad and you bring the shadows down just a tad. It will increase the contrast in your photograph, or you can do the reverse. If you want to lower the highlights, in this one it might look better with lowering the highlights and upping the shadows. So there it's more of like a lower contrast image. So, but again, this is an S curve, so you can make it an S on either direction. It's also cool, you can play with the colors. So the RGB color spectrum is the color, you know, the primary colors of light. So you can really play with the color balance in this way. Maybe we like make the highlights more of like a red. Maybe we make the shadows more of like a green. Or no, we go this way to make it green. So you can really play with all of these different color dimensions here. There we go. It's looking very different. And then if you don't like what you've been doing, you can hit the reset button and it will reset it back to the original photograph. You can also do Command Z to edit or to undo any of the edits you've just done. And a really nice thing about Lightroom is if you have several photographs in this same sequence of lighting, or you just want to do the same effect. So say everything I just did to this photograph, I want to do to this next one. I click on it and hit the previous button, and it will apply all those same edits and presets and values that I just did on the last photo to this photo, and then I can go from there and edit it further. But that's a really easy way to speed up your workflow so that you're not opening each individual photo in Photoshop and having to add every single thing. Again, if they're identical changes, you may as well just hit the previous button and make them identical. Okay, what else? Let's see. So we have here this picture of her trying to kiss the moon. You can see that my highlights are blown because it has like a little indicator. Obviously those little red spots are not going to save with my actual file. That's just a preview of my blown highlight. So if that bothers you, you can always like take the highlights down a little bit to get rid of those. Let's see. Clarity is usually something that you'll play with on portraits. Usually with portraits of women, if you move the clarity down, it kind of makes them look like a porcelain doll. Their skin tones are very smooth and they almost have this glowing effect to them, versus if you're doing pictures of like a wicker basket or leaves or something that you want to have more clarity on. You can see if I turn up the clarity, you're going to see every wrinkle, every pore, every piece of hair. It really increases the contrast of each of those details. The Dehaze option will take away camera glare. So if you move it this direction, it makes your values darker, gets rid of the glare. This direction will add more glare. Kind of depends on what look you want. The vibrance and saturation will just increase the intensity of your colors. And then down here you can work with the colors further. So say I want to get rid of all of the orange values. I can turn down the saturation on that. The luminance makes your color lighter or darker. So if I want to make the reds more luminant, I could bring them up. See how her lips are brighter. And if you want to zoom in, just click on it and it'll zoom you way in so you can see what the changes you're doing, how they're taking effect. So here the reds are darker, here they're brighter, using the luminance slider. And then of course the hue will just allow you to make your reds more like purpley or more orangey. So those can be really helpful for creating a color accent. Like say I just want her lips to stand out. You can lower the yellow values. Let's go to saturation. Lower the yellows. I think I see a little bit of purple and blue in the sky. Get rid of the blue and the green. There we go. So now we just pretty much have her red. Sometimes you'll lower that a little bit just so that the reds of her skin go away. And then we really see just the reds of her lip and this like car headlight over here. So that's the color, creating a color accent. Let's see what else. I want to find a really high ISO image. So in a lot of these pictures, I'm just going to click on this one and then hit reset because I've already edited this a lot in my last class. You can see these blue areas are showing where I don't have any detail in the shadows. So if you wanted to fix that, you can go up here and increase the shadow values. That goes away. And then I want to see what the grain looks like on this. So if I zoom way in, you can really see all those little speckles, all those little grains. You can really see it on her face too. So in order to correct that, that's from my ISO. My ISO was on 6400. So that's a pretty high ISO because it was dark out. And I wanted to, it was more important to me to capture them in like stop action with no blur, with no motion blur or anything. So instead of using like a 1 second exposure, I used a faster exposure, like 1/60th of a second. But as a result, I get noise. To get rid of the noise, you just scroll down here to where it says detail, and then you have this luminance slider under noise reduction. Watch what happens when I turn it up halfway. So you see the noise here, and then now it's gone. You can see before and after what that looked like, and it'll stay zoomed in. So you can really see the grain on her cheek here is eliminated in my version with the luminance slider turned up. So I really like using that to get rid of ISO noise. Obviously the best way to not have ISO noise is just to use a low ISO like ISO 200 or ISO 400. So if you can challenge yourself to find other ways to brighten your picture without increasing the ISO a whole lot, you'll just get a better quality image. But, you know, in a pinch, don't hesitate to use high ISOs because there are a lot of programs that can fix that, including Lightroom. Okay, let's see. We also have the vignette. These are just some basic things that I do to most pictures. I usually adjust the temperature. I usually adjust, oh, another thing I do is I'll start at the top and I'll just hit the auto button. So I want to see what Lightroom thinks this picture needs. And oop, there it kind of filled in the shadow values. It thought the highlights were good, but it wanted a little bit more you know, definition in the shadows. So I'll start there, and then I can like add contrast and I can make it to my liking. Maybe take down the shadows a little bit because I do want it to look like a film noir, kind of like a spy novel or some kind of like a mystery thriller, murder mystery movie. So I can also, like I was showing you before, add a vignette. So if you move it to the left, it'll make the edges darker, and of course they won't print with that blue. That's just an indicator that yes, this is dark. There's not a lot of details in the shadows here, but you can see a good preview of it up here. You can also move it to the right. Nobody ever really adds a white highlight or a white vignette, so I would just stick to the darker one because the idea is to draw your eye in, not to draw your eye out to your subject. So that's pretty much most of the tools that you'll need to know in order to manipulate most photographs. Most of the time that's all they need. But if you need to do something a little bit more specific, we also have, over here we have different filters, kind of like you would have in Instagram. So this is really helpful for adding like black and white filters. These are creative filters. Aged photo is kind of nice. Here's all the different black and white. And then from there, once you add that black and white filter, I can come over here and change things like on top of that. So I can increase the contrast, I can lower the exposure. It really doesn't like that. I can increase the blacks a little bit. So you can make these changes. Maybe I determine that, oh yeah, this is a really high ISO noisy picture. So I can go down here to luminance and try and get rid of that. And some of these filters work better than others with all of these tools over here. But that one got rid of most of it. So you can really see the before and after, how much better that noise looks. Okay, and most images are not meant to be scrutinized from like this far away, right? You're going to be seeing it at a distance even if it's printed out. So you don't have to be too particular about the noise. But the focus is important, and focus can be difficult to get at night. So yeah, feel free to add some different filters. I would recommend that if you're going to make a black and white image, I would make a copy of the image first so you have the color version and you have the black and white so that it's not like a destructive edit that you've made. So you can go back and see the color one if you want. So what you'll do is you'll right click, you'll go to create virtual copy, and then just hit the reset button on the first one, or make the copy obviously before you make all the changes. But I only do this really if I'm going to change it from color to black and white. Most edits are helpful, and the picture always looks better after I've edited, so I don't make copies unless I'm making a black and white or something like that. So here we have the color, and then there's the black and white version. Okay, so these settings up here at the top are a little bit more specific depending on what you need to do. So let's edit one of these pictures. Yeah, where we can make a lot of changes. So up here at the top, the first one is going to allow you to resize your image. I would hold shift when you're resizing because you want to constrain it to like a standard size so that if you ever go to print it or anything, it'll fit in a frame. And then you hit enter when you're done. There we go, a little closer in. This next one is like a clone stamp tool. Ideally it's for blemishes or fire hydrants in the background or something confusing or distracting. But I'm just going to use it on the moon to show you what it does. So here we have our nice moon in the sky. This is really the point of the picture, so it kind of defeats the purpose to get rid of it. But you can make the dot that you're trying to change smaller or bigger with the bracket keys. You just want it to fit right over what you're trying to replace. And then you click on it, and it's going to, whoops, it didn't do a very good job, so we're going to place it. Say, I want this. And then right now it's healing, so it's on the heal setting, which means that it's like a in-between. I don't want that. I want it to clone that area. So when I click on clone, you'll see it takes the sky values from there and places it where the moon was. This is something that might be easier to do in Photoshop, but at least for quick edits, it's an option for you. And then you can see obviously what that before and after looked like. It got rid of the moon. The next thing over is red eye. I don't have any pictures with red eye, so that one doesn't apply. But up here at the top, we have this gradient mask. So if you click on the gradient mask, we can change something like the sky. So you click and drag down. And now this mask is only going to affect what's above it. So it kind of fades. And I'm going to lower the exposure. All of these changes, all these settings over here, you see they're kind of highlighted. This is all with the mask. So I think I need to increase the saturation. See how it's turned all the way down? So I'm going to turn that up so I can see some color in my sky. I might need to increase the highlights. Maybe make it more blue. And maybe dehaze it a little bit. You can even change the hue down here if you want it to be a different color. Kind of want it to look bluish. I think it's a blue sky. Ooh, that one's very different. All right, so you can kind of see what it did. I'll just make it kind of an extreme change. So you can see before and after the difference in the sky that I added with the blending or with the gradient mask. So that can be helpful when trying to fill in a blown out sky. Okay, this last one, I'm just going to skip this next one, is called the adjustment brush. So what the adjustment brush allows us to do is edit just certain parts of the image. It's kind of similar to making a selection in Photoshop, but it paints a selection. So it'll paint the area where you're going to either darken the shadows, brighten the highlights, add any of these various effects, just like we did with the gradient mask. Okay, so I'm going to click on the adjustment brush, and then I'm just going to paint on her face. It looks like she already has some on her face, so I'm going to go down to the bottom and hit reset, and then now I'm going to start painting. Okay, so as I paint, the more you paint, the more it's going to take effect. I'm just kind of like telling Photoshop this is the area that I want to affect. Oops, I moved that little thing. Okay, so I can now go up to the top, I can turn up the exposure, I can increase the highlights, increase the blacks. Okay, so now when I click done, you can see the difference between her face on this side and her face on this side. So it kind of brought out those highlights just where I painted with the adjustment brush. So that's super helpful. There's so many other things that you can do, but that should be a pretty good starting point. You can hit the auto button to see what Lightroom thinks would be the best changes to make to begin with, and then you can go from there. So it obviously brightened her a little bit, and my lights just turned off, so I think that means that I'm done. Whenever you're finished with your file or multiple files, you can select more than one. So say I like this one in black and white, I like this one as well. So I can hold down Command and click on a couple, and then go up to the File option and go down to Export. Now I like to keep my settings pretty similar. You can choose a specific folder, or you just put it on the desktop. I like to put them in the final folder, like whatever folder I happen to have. I already have them in a final folder, but if I didn't, I just called it Noir on my desktop. I can put it in the subfolder Final within that folder, so I can always like find them very easily. And then I always turn the quality up to 100, and you want them to at least be 300 ppi for resolution, good enough for print and most web display options. Happy Lightrooming!